What's a very disturbing fact almost nobody knows? Viewer edition. You want to know a disturbing fact? I'm pretty sure I even might have learned this from one of these videos. But I'm older than every living dog. The oldest dog on record was 31, and I'm older than that, which means every dog that was alive when I was born is gone now. And that might not disturb you, but it disturbs me. Story 1. I was an infant in the 80s and had to have a few surgeries done. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if I went through some of them fully consciously. It would explain a few things. I don't honestly believe that doctors thought infants don't feel pain. Anyone who has vaccinated a baby knows damn well that they feel pain. The real belief was probably that anesthesia is a complicated and risky procedure, especially on someone that's so small, and babies can't really complain and probably won't remember the experience afterwards, so it doesn't really matter if they're in pain or not, if the end result is them getting better and the risk of anesthesia isn't worth it. Now that anesthetizing infants is more routine and the risk is low enough, the medical community finds it more palatable to say, we simply didn't know, versus, yeah, we're going to subject your baby to unimaginable suffering that we don't even subject animals or POWs to because it's easier. So yeah, this is referencing in the original video that these comments were made under. There was, the fact was that up until like the 70s or 80s or some nonsense, doctors claimed that infants don't feel pain and therefore don't need anesthesia before, undergoing a procedure. Which, yeah, this explanation makes sense. But either way, just bonkers. Story 2. First fact, I was bitten on the arm by a drunk chick at a Cradle of Filth concert back in 2018. She was trying to force her way past me when I was up the barricade, and I refused to let her take my spot. She thought biting me was a good idea. She got hauled out by security, tetanus shot, wound cleaning, and a month worth of heavy-duty antibiotics, and a month worth of antiretrovirals in case of HIV transmission. Out of pocket was over $1,000. First off, I was a little bit shocked to read that you were bit in the arm by a human until I saw that it was at a Cradle of Filth concert. That's no judgment at all. I've never been to one of their concerts, but I have had friends who have, so fun times. Also, that sucks. And the fact that, you should have been able to, go to security and be like, can I have her information? Because she needs to pay for this. Story 3. Worked in the Texas Medical Center for 25 years. The St. Joseph story about the resident doctor's decapitation is even worse than it sounds. The elevator was stuck with about 18 inches of opening at the top. The doctor opened the inner door and was attempting to crawl out onto the floor. He got his head out, and at that exact moment, the elevator went down to the next floor, severing his neck. The headless body fell back into the elevator car with a lone woman passenger. She was stuck in the elevator for 45 minutes with the body before the maintenance staff got her out. Story 4. I remember seeing Sandeep Kaur's face, not attached to her, in a Guinness Book of World Records when I was a child. It's to her scalp, too, pigtails and all. Disturbing as heck, but also absolutely amazing that she survived that the transplant was successful, and that she's doing well and studying medicine. It's nice to hear what she's doing with her life and that she's succeeding after such a traumatic incident. Story 5. Concerning Story 15, as someone who studies chemistry, there are way worse things than some acid that melts your skin away. Sure, acid is painful, but there are things that'd go mostly unnoticed until it's too late. Things that'd show up poorly on a tox screen, etc. Many ways to use chemicals as a weapon. It's actually kind of scary to think about when you know that everyone who wants it can start a study in chemistry, and most information is available online nowadays. You just need to know how to combine information that makes it dangerous. Story 6. When my oldest sister was born, according to my mother, her head was in a weird position, so a doctor had to adjust her head when she was coming out. When he did that, her collarbone broke without anyone realizing, and she cried nonstop for a few weeks until my mom went to the doctors and got an x-ray. Imagine if that was in the 80s. Story 7. As someone who grew up in Minnesota, I have to remind you Duluth, Minnesota is the farthest inland port with direct access to the ocean. When you also factor in the Iron Range and how many metals are mined out of northern Minnesota, it would actually be an ideal spot to bomb to shut down trade in the U.S. All right, to explain, there was some fact about, I don't know, places getting nuked or bombed or something, and I said I felt safe because I live in Minnesota, and people, please don't correct me on that. And this person decided to correct me. And they decided to correct me by bringing up Duluth, Minnesota, a city I once lived in and my favorite city in the entire United States, and then decided to bring up the Iron Range in northern Minnesota, where I was born and grew up. So thanks a lot. Also, a lot of actual steel production is now outsourced to China and stuff like that, so it really actually wouldn't be as big of a shutdown to U.S. trade as it might have been, say, 30 years ago. Story 8. Concerning Story 24, yeah, it's called Depression. Vitamin D has a significant impact on our body and mind. I started to look more into it after coming out of a depressive episode and realized what really helped was going outside and eventually going on walks. Open your curtains and get some sunlight. Story 9. Your eyes are not recognized by your immune system. This is mostly to perfect swelling from minor scratches, which is common, but also means that if an immune cell got in there, you could easily go blind. Story 10. Story 4 reminded me of a convo I had with someone a while back. I was talking with a few of my friends one day, and we got on the topic of weird medical history. I mentioned the fact about babies not being given anesthesia, and me and two of my friends all agreed that was really weird. Then the third friend of mine that was at the table with us said, "Yeah, that's strange, but I don't see a problem with it. The babies are too young to remember it, so it doesn't matter if it hurts or not." Me and my other two friends looked at each other, then looked at him, and we all kind of just did an awkward laugh until the third friend said, "What's so funny?" And then we stopped laughing, and one of us asked him if he was joking or not, and he said, "No, I'm not joking. The babies are too little to remember the pain of surgery without anesthesia, so it doesn't matter if they feel the pain." Y'all, this man was dead serious when he said it was okay to not give babies anesthesia during surgery because they're too little to remember the pain. Me and the other two friends spent like 5 minutes trying to convince him how wrong that is, but he wouldn't budge. I'm no longer friends with that guy for unrelated reasons, but holy crap, that was an awkward conversation. Story 11. I've always found the cordyceps and other fungi like that really interesting. Over time, we've seen it being able to control larger and larger insects like tarantulas, moths, and butterflies. Humans don't have anything to worry about. Our body temperatures are too warm for the cordyceps to survive. Although, in a few thousand years, it's possible for it to evolve to at least smaller mammals. It's also pretty cool how that concept is actually taken into popular horror games such as The Last of Us and Choo Choo Charles. So, I was with you through this whole thing. Cordyceps is really interesting of the various insects that it infects. And yeah, I think I haven't finished The Last of Us yet, but and I've never played the game, and I never will. There was the talk of like, oh, if it suddenly evolved to survive the temperature of the human body, and that was the whole, conceit of that story. The thing I'm really stuck on here is what the hell is Choo Choo Charles? Story 12. There's one for you. Testicular torsion and ovarian torsion, there's a woman version as well, can happen at any time for any reason. Hurts like hell, like a kick right on that place, and the pain never stops, and makes you monoball. Oh, and most cases occur in the sleep. Good night, friends. Story 13. The gamma ray fact is true, except the vaporizing thing. It would probably not contain a lot of heat, but it would definitely strip us from our ozone layer and destroy the atmosphere, but it wouldn't immediately vaporize us, which makes it much, much worse, as it would be a fast but not instantaneous end, most likely. It would be horrible, but the chance is pretty slim. Might only have happened at one point already, though, at one mass extinction. Story 14. As someone who's a marine biologist, some of you guys have a reason to be scared of the ocean. There's a very high chance that there is still at least one megalodon out there somewhere very deep in the ocean, or something almost as big as it. You should be more scared of giant squids than sharks. Both are harmless to humans, though. Okay, I am all for the fact that, people should not be nearly afraid of sharks and stuff, as some of them are. Sharks are typically not dangerous, but harmless to humans. I mean, there are some shark attacks. They're rare, and they're usually provoked by, like, some human stupidity or whatnot. But let's not say harmless. I think we should take a page out of Douglas Adams' book and classify them as mostly harmless.
Story 15. One disturbing fact is that one of the textures in the original Dune contains images of the real corpse of a man and woman being executed by being shot, hung upside down, and stoned. The texture was made by taking the bottom half of the man and then merging it with the top of the lady. Have a nice day. Story 16. Fun additional fact for the human bite in Story 1. Apparently our teeth have a crap ton of these bacteria trapped in them, so if our teeth break off in something we bite, it's as good as dead. It's probably an adaptation. We are a social animal, so one dying from not being able to eat, meaning the entire village lives because that lion rapidly gets ill and dies. Survival of the group. Story 17. First time I did CPR ever on a real patient, I immediately broke their ribs. It's normal and necessary to do so while doing compressions, but you only ever learn on rubber dummies at first, and nothing ever prepared me for that first crack I felt.
So I remember when I the first time I ever did CPR training in the class, the CPR instructor very clearly told us, like, yeah, no, you've got to break, you're going to break the ribs probably. You're going to do this and you're going to hear a rib break. You need to not freak out because that is the least of their worries if you have to give CPR. And I remember there was someone in the class and she was like, but is there a way I can do it without breaking the ribs? Because I don't want to do that. And it's like, what an interesting thing to be like, I know you say that people have to do it, but come on, what's the secret?
Story 18. Donor organ rejection. Even if your body seems to accept a donor organ and does not reject it outright, it will still only last you something like a small couple of years. I'm not certain on the time frames. So aside from the fact that it's hard to find donor organs you need, it's not something you only have to do once. It's an ongoing thing. It only buys you a little bit of time. Story 19. Concerning Story 24, milk is a good source of vitamin D. However, as you get older, your body's ability to process lactose diminishes as you will start excluding milk more and more from your diet. This is especially accelerated if you quit drinking milk completely for a period of time. Adults generally reduce the amount of milk they consume over time compared to the amount they had when they were children. I used to eat a small bowl of cereal every day with my breakfast, or at least a glass of strawberry or chocolate milk when I did not get cereal. When I moved into my girlfriend's, now wife's, home, she didn't have any milk in her fridge, allergic to lactose. I went months without milk. One day I decided to buy cereal and milk. It was a nasty surprise to find out that I could not tolerate milk anymore. I've since switched to lactose-free milk, more expensive. My wife wasn't aware such a thing existed and now have been having milk occasionally. She missed eating cereal. Story 20. A disturbing prison fact. I know people who work in our Canadian prison system. Some disturbing facts are: 1. A large part of prison population are Indigenous peoples. 2. The main reason is their upbringings. Many come from extremely traumatic backgrounds and have cognitive disorders from lack of nutrition during early childhood years and/or harmful practices during pregnancy. 3. A huge number of incarcerated men, including non-Indigenous, have history of abuse in their childhoods, with some reporting multiple abusers. That's 800 plus individuals per prison. It's really sad and disturbing knowing that most incarcerated individuals are just kids in adult bodies. Even more disturbing to me personally that pedophilia is more common than you think. Of course, I always knew, but when you work among vulnerable populations, the numbers are hard to wrap your head around.
Oh, hey, neat. Sounds like the Canadian prison system is trying to contend with the U.S. for being just garbage. Folks, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be prisons and stuff. I'm just saying that maybe they should focus on rehabilitation and therapy and things like that. And I mean, that's just my opinion and, you know, the opinion of any credible person who's done research on it.
Story 21. If you've ever wondered why it seems like everyone that got caught for murder did some very stupid things, it's because that's necessary to get caught. Also note that those are just cases where they know it was murder. Cases where a person just got up and went missing, not murder. Pretty sure it doesn't actually include all homicide cases, or it would be an example of a misleading statistic. I haven't actually looked into it. Regardless, if it gets classified as natural causes or an accident, so not a homicide, or if there's some way to claim self-defense, or the evidence points to it being unintentional homicide, I would guess there are certain cases that the police default to manslaughter, then that means even more people are getting away with murder than you think. Story 22. For me, the fact that when you consciously move, the movement actually happens before you're aware of your decision, meaning we act before we're aware or decide to do so, putting in question the whole concept of free will. Story 23. In my mom's hometown, they had a self-termination where the victim supposedly stabbed herself in the back, then tied her hands together and hung herself. The prime suspect was the police chief's son, and a couple was murdered, cut up, and thrown into a lake/pond. I don't believe that murder was ever solved. Story 24. The reason the veterinary nurses have such a high self-termination rate isn't because they have to deal with dying pets and pets getting put down. It's because they have to give families the news that their beloved pet is suffering and the treatment is very expensive, but their insurance won't cover it, so they have to watch the family make the decision to let their pet suffer or let them go. And the hardest is seeing the people bring them home where they'll die a slow and painful death.
Well, that's a downer. And that right there is probably why I don't think I could be in the veterinary trade, because, having to deal with folks, going through that kind of stuff. I get worked up and teary-eyed and upset just thinking about the possibility of one day having to put down my dogs. And for those of you who do work as veterinary nurses or veterinarians, whatever in the trade, vet tech, thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for keeping our pets happy and healthy. And when they can't, and when these tough moments come around, I know it can't be easy, but just know that you bring so much more good into this world than you do bad news. And you've allowed so many people to keep their pets happy and healthy. Just thanks.
Story 25. You know about the moray eel. A lot of people think that fact inspired the second Jaw-style tongue that the xenomorphs have in Alien, but the movies were actually made before this discovery. Story 26. I had no idea until I tried drowning one by throwing it into the laundry washer, only to find it still walking around like it was nothing, but most, if not all, spiders have a thin layer of oxygen between their skin and bones. It's it's hard to believe it, but that's what helps make spiders so aerodynamic. It also helps prevent drowning. Story 27. Another disturbing fact. If a person suffers from an emergency situation in a well-populated area, that person will not be helped until they already suffered near-fatal damage. This is the bystander effect. The more people present, the more it discourages others to help because they're thinking that someone else will help. In turn, no one will help until the person is in a dire situation or already dead. Story 28. Missing kids/adults. The 48-72-hour rule doesn't exist. Go to the authorities as soon as you have reason to believe someone is missing. Kids kick things into high gear immediately. Adults don't warrant the same vigor, but it's important to get documentation ASAP so things will get moving the longer they're missing. Police will usually at least put out a BOLO, which means be on the lookout, and may help you contact the local hospital to see if there is a John/Jane Doe. Bottom line, don't wait. Be annoying, make noise. It could save a life.
Yeah. I mean, if you have good reason to believe that, a person is missing and should not be, report it, get some word out, because I don't think it's going to take too many resources from authorities and other people just to at least, having people BOLO, be on the lookout, So, yeah, don't take chances with that kind of stuff.
Story 29. Babies do feel pain and can learn to be scared of anything that they associate with that experience subconsciously, but at the same time, when you're old enough to gain consciousness and remember things, you won't remember a surgery where they didn't numb you or put you to sleep. It's weird how the brain works if you think about it. Story 30. I don't know if this one is actually true because I saw one video about it 3 years ago and nobody has ever mentioned it since. Apparently, we're locked inside of our galaxy. Surrounding, I think, the galaxy is just a massive wall of plasma or like a massive expanse that is just super hot plasma. We cannot escape as we are now.
I mean, I don't know if that's disturbing. I think it would be more disturbing if just the universe went on forever, because that is harder to wrap my mind around than the idea of it being in some way finite, even if expanding. And like, we can't escape it as we are now. That's fine. There's enough of it. I'm good.
Story 31. Someone smarter than me help. There was a procedure done until recently, 1960s or something, where doctors would remove your intestines, I think it was the small intestines, thinking that it's more efficient to skip the other intestine. So they would remove it and connect it straight to the colon. Needless to say, this caused a lot of issues. I wish I could remember this better, but hopefully there is someone smarter than me that can fill in the blanks. Story 32. There are spiders that can fly through a method called ballooning. It doesn't even have to be windy. They can ride electric fields. Story 33. Concerning Story 31, there is a Pepper song by Butthole Surfers, the strangest name for a music artist, reference where he says, "The dolphin who played Flipper committed self-termination. Heard he caught a nasty virus, then there was the ever-present football arist." I think it's a reference because this line in the song, "Another Mikey took a knife while arguing in traffic, Flipper died a natural death. He caught a nasty virus, then there was the ever-present football player arist." Story 34. I love the fact during the Cold War, the U.S. had 3 flying fortresses carrying nuclear payloads flying around the continental United States. It was a rapid response measure to retaliate if the USSR launched. During one mid-air refuel, the bomber started spewing fuel and they crashed. 2 nukes were in the plane. Landed in one of the Carolinas. When they searched the wreckage, they found on one of the nukes out of the 3 safety measures, 1 didn't fail, and it was a manual toggle. We almost nuked ourselves on accident. Story 35. About secondhand smoking. Both of my parents smoke a lot, and of course they only smoke on the balcony, which is right below my room, and I don't have an AC, so in the summers, I always need my window open so I don't effing die, but I end up having to choose between getting cooked in my room or having to power through the smell of ciggies that I will never get used to. I don't know how people can bear smoking. I am working with them to at the very least smoke somewhere else, but they forget more often than not, so I do get worried for myself since this has been happening since I was 5. I don't know if it's part of growing up or related to exposure, but I have noticed my throat getting raspier by the years.
So, I used to smoke. Not for very long. I think from age 26 until maybe 30 at the most. I picked it up for a bit. I did hookahs. I smoked cigars and some cigarettes and stuff. But I always made sure to never smoke around anyone who wasn't smoking, who didn't want to be around the smoke. And I'm for if folks want to smoke. I mean, it's their body. We all have some vices that aren't great for us, I'm sure. But if you are going to do that, at the very least, be a considerate person and make sure that you're not exposing someone else to that stuff who doesn't want to be exposed to it. And thankfully, the few smokers I know in my life and everything are really wonderful about that and really polite. So, just think about other people.
Story 36. Any even casual research into doctors reveals a lot of weird stuff. There was a book about 20 years ago called Complications that brought the concept of doctors being these lofty, super intelligent, objective, altruistic, non-fallible, never insane humans down a few notches. Read down a lot of notches. There was also a study done years ago about how little doctors might actually know about what they're talking about. I don't recommend reading any of this if you were the type to think that consulting your doctor for vaccine advice during COVID was necessarily a good thing. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. Story 37. To add on, lung cancer is also the deadliest cancer by far, taking between 110,000 to 130,000 lives in the U.S. alone each year. The reason it's so deadly is for a multitude of reasons. However, the main is because of how your lungs are internal organs, and unlike other organs, you need to scan the lungs to see if there's any cancer present, and hospitals don't just go around doing that as it's too expensive, so please do not smoke, for you and others' sake. Story 38. The suburbs really aren't a whole lot safer, if even that, than the inner city. Things like drugs, gun violence, and assault seem like purely city problems, but are actually quite common in the burbs, and there are a few things that are actually way more prevalent there, like child predation. Oh, and speaking of assaults are shockingly less likely to be punished in the suburbs, largely due to the perpetrators' higher social standing, meaning there's much less of a deterrent. So that white neighborhood still looks good?
Wait a minute, you're saying that my little suburban existence isn't the safest in the whole wide world? Yeah, no, I don't think anywhere is, safe from anything, and, I was about to say be on guard, but that's a really dystopian kind of message. Bad things can happen anywhere, so, protect yourself, be safe, don't think just because you're in a good neighborhood that nothing bad will happen, but also if you're in a bad neighborhood, don't think that, it can't be absolutely fine. I don't know. Yeah.
Story 39. Here's another one. False vacuum decay. Basically, in the quantum world, there are different quantum fields, such as the electromagnetic fields that are all around us and essentially control how particles and the laws of physics work. One of these quantum fields is called the Higgs field, which controls the mass of particles. Everything in the universe wants to be stable. For example, a roller coaster at the top of a hill wants to go down the hill to reach its most stable state. This is the same with quantum fields. However, many scientists theorize that the Higgs field might actually be metastable instead of actually stable. It's like if the bottom of the hill the roller coaster is on is actually not the lowest point on the roller coaster, there's actually a lower point at the bottom of another hill. If at any location in the universe the Higgs field were to suddenly become stable, it would form a giant sphere growing at around the speed of light. When something touches this bubble, the laws of physics change for it since the mass of particles are all different. If it hits us, it would be likely that life would become impossible. And since it travels at about the speed of light, it would be impossible to see it coming or predict it. One moment you'd be sitting on your couch reading this comment, and the next everything would be gone. Story 40. Brain surgery is mainly done without anesthetics, so there may be times where someone might have felt goddamn everything. Only 2% of the Earth's ocean has ever been explored, so God knows what else lives down there. America as a country was some of the most serial killers. Back in World War I, PTSD at the time was not properly diagnosed, thus if anybody had the symptoms, they would be executed because they thought it was a sign of cowardice. You can be perfectly healthy and still die via aneurysm. They can and will occur at any second. And last but not least, there were times when people woke up in the midst of surgery. This will cause the patient to develop severe PTSD. Story 41. A disturbing fact that almost no one knows: about 60% of bridges in the United States are non-redundant, which means that every member of the bridge is internal to the structure stability, and if even one of them fails, the whole bridge comes down. This means that non-redundant bridges that aren't inspected rigorously are at a much greater risk of collapse compared to newer redundant bridges. Now consider the aging, poorly maintained American infrastructure and think twice about that old bridge you're crossing every day you go to work.
Oh man, and here I thought I was just getting over the anxiety and fear that I always feel when driving over large bridges, like the real big uns. Whenever I have to drive, people in the car notice, I get dead silent, white knuckle, panics me a little bit. I don't like being on bridges, and I felt like I was getting over that stuff.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.